we're about a month and a half into the competition. So about this time, we should be starting to lay out boards and kind of finalizing that design. So with that, we have Scot MacPherson, who is a practicing architect and a professor of architecture at BGSU. And he's going to present some different tactics for producing really nice boards and renderings and all of that. So with that, I'll let Scot take it away.
Great, thank you very much, Elizabeth. Hi, everybody. I'm going to pretend like there's 6,000 people on, and then you guys can all get on later on and check it out. Believe me, I'm a teacher, so I know how it goes. And it's Happy Valentine's Day. Let me just start to share. So, yeah, as Elizabeth said, so I'm a professor at Bowling Green State University. I just give just a 1-minute background on myself. Some of you know who I am. Some of you do not. Those that were on last year may be a bit redundant, but I would strongly encourage you to go on and have your mentors and your advisors and things, probably talk, 45 minutes to an hour. It's 6:07. I'll probably be done around 7 o'clock. And I think the 45 minutes would be worth checking it out, to understand what goes into a competition. I've been down at Bowling Green for 17 years. And I was just saying beforehand, 8-9 years ago, we were 70 to 100 students. We're well over 200 now. We have a $10 million edition going on starting soon. We're fully accredited. We have the largest freshman incoming class. I am the freshman coordinator. I teach senior thesis as well as sustainability in grad school and design studios. So I kind of go from freshman all the way through the very end of our very final graduate programs of students going out and working all over the United States. So it's rewarding. And then my wife and I have a firm in downtown Toledo, a small intensive design firm, which we've had for 35 years. Prior to coming here, I lived in Boston for 20 years. I was fortunate enough to work at some big international great firms. And then my wife and I won a competition, just like you are doing right now. And you will find that when you become architects, and hopefully a lot of you will, and decide to go to undergraduate school and then get your graduate degree and master's, lots of architects thrive and do many, many competitions during the year. So in like 1990, we won a competition on the Boston Common, which actually launched our firm. Kate started our firm. She's obviously an architect. We met in graduate school at Washington University. It's in St. Louis. And long story short, we have a firm, 32 years later, we're still going strong. And doing, right now, we've got projects in California and Illinois, and we do a lot of regional work. We have stuff all over the United States as well. So that's kind of cool. So I love practicing and I love teaching, and they really go hand in hand, when it comes to how you do things. A competition, I've judged this, I think now, and I will judge it this year for graphic intent. So I will be talking, look, I'm a design architect, and all I teach is design studio. I teach sustainability, philosophy, mechanical systems, structures. I can do all that, but I'm ostensibly for 20 years out east and here a design professor. So I've looked at the project, I've looked at the program. I think it's quite interesting. Strip mall, box, and how do you sort of bring some ambience to that? So the 12 or 13 years that I've been pleased to be a participant and work on this, guess what? You're not there. You don't get to present your work. Your graphic representation is everything, along with the very, very strong design concept. So here's a board. Thousands and thousands of competitions are done during the year. I've done hundreds in my lifetime, sometimes in the Midwest, sometimes in New England. We've done them in Helsinki, Kuala Lumpur, Beijing, you name it. You can't go there. Your work has to speak for itself. So some of you have already done this for a couple of years. You might have done it sophomore, junior year, or junior year, and now you're senior. So you sort of No, but it should be, you know, hopefully graphic representation wise, it's better than last year. Each year you have to go on. I don't make it up. You have to compose the sheet, but so as you start to see, there's a piece right here, right? And you can start to see that there's a big money shot right here on the water of this particular piece. One thing that I notice when I come down and I review the two boards for graphic representation, because we give some awards, Bowling Green State University gives awards. I will say right now, I'm teaching all the freshmen right now. I think I have 50 freshmen, and I think there's 6 maybe from Anthony Wayne, one from Springfield, Oregon, Start, one from, we have people, probably 5 people in the program from Perrysburg. So probably 6 to 7% of our students, maybe 10%, not 10, 5 to 6, maybe 8% of our students are coming from the local high schools. They come from all around the country, mostly from a 400-mile radius. But you know, please come down and visit me anytime you want. And it's not a plug. You go wherever you want to go to college, and I think it's fantastic. But if you just want to ever come down and see a design studio, please look me up at BGSU and let me know. I've already had 50, 60 kids shout at me this year. We break up this space so that you have a big money shot, and then you have this banding of this tartan grid in the bottom. You'll see when you come on and then you look at this at a later date, you start to have vignettes of what the spaces are. So there's hierarchy, folks. Hierarchy means the ranking of things. And I always sort of talk about this. Too many times, the boards are very nice, which you do, but lots of times I will show you some competition rendering boards that potentially don't have any hierarchy. Everything is the same. Your rendering sizes are the same as your plans, same as the site plan. Nothing stands out. Most of the time, architects prioritize things, right? I'm just drawing. I mean, you can't even read that, but that says prioritize. This says hierarchy. You can do it by size. You can do hierarchy by shape. You have all these things, and all of a sudden, that calls attention to itself. That calls attention to itself by size, or you can do it by placement, right? You've got 3 things, and now this is off to the side. So as you start to coordinate and do your boards, one of the most important things that you start to do, and I'll call it a grid, and your mentors, hopefully, and your teachers are helping you. You should take tracing paper, just like I'm doing. And as you start to get into your rendering, so it's rendering day, right? You know, it's rendering, but I would also clarify it's more of a layout day than it is a rendering day. How do you lay out your boards? How do you prioritize the information so that you have a big shot that you want people to get excited about on the river or the lake or the ocean or wherever this may be? And then the other salient information, i.e. important information, that you show from how you derived your concept. You should write down, when you listen to this, if you ever listen to it, PARTI, P-A-R-T-I. It means the big idea, the big concept. Architect, we have our own vocabulary, and we're always talking about what's the PARTI. I always ask my grad students, my freshmen, my senior thesis, everybody, what's your PARTI? It basically means what's the big idea. So your board needs to be able to communicate graphically what the big idea is. So let me format. Just bear with me, clear. So on this particular board, you have lots of diagrams. Most of the time, you guys do not have model shots. Sometimes you don't really have time to do models, which I think that's kind of too bad. I mean, to a certain degree. Like I said, this is graphic representation. So basically, I've lost the now this screen is messed up. I can't draw it anymore. It doesn't matter that I can't draw, it's fine. So you can see, because you spend a lot of time on your renderings, but basically you're going to have a site plan, how you deal with the pool facility, you know, in the sort of strip shopping mall, you know, along that side, there's a lot of parking. It's a very suburban, dense, crowded area. You know, there's Chipotle across the street. I mean, it's not really a memorable space when it comes to, you know, the site itself. You know, it's off the highway, lots and lots of cars. It's a world of traffic, but will be a respite. So, I mean, I think it is fascinating. How do you sort of take a box and take sort of the big box of Walgreens, you know, Walmart, Best Buy, et cetera. In this case, you know, if you look at the one that's in Holland, it's a box. How can you make it something special and different than what's been done in the past, where you can start to make it your own? So you can start to see here, this layout, you know, the Buckhead Back Alley Culinary Arts Club. So you can start to see the site starts to really mean something. They start to use diagrams. You should be actually diagramming things, sketchbook ideas. I noticed in the past, I think, so you can see, here's an example where this particular layout is very, very busy compared to this layout. One's not better than the other, right? One thing that very rarely you see how this big shot up in the sky, since I can't seem to use my printer, my finger to draw anymore. You're overlaying the plans up in the sky. So most of the time you just have a box, and within a box, you have a box, then another 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 box. There's lots of different ways that you can deal with your graphic representation, especially when you have larger renderings. You have big drawings, medium drawings, little drawings, depending on what your priority or hierarchy is. And then you start to have your plans, sections, elevations, whatever you decide to do. You can float things. You should have some literary things. You should have a literary and graphic sketchbook, I would hope, that you're working on. Since you started in January, you were writing your ideas down. You're keeping a notebook, and not with lines on it, like a sketchbook that you buy at Michael's or someplace, and you could cut and paste things in there. You know, you're beyond that to a certain degree. You're starting to, I noticed this time last year, though, most students, I think you're supposed to be 50, 60% done, but this time last year, only maybe, you know, it seemed like you were only 20 or 30% done. And I don't know if that's the case this year, because I don't really know how many of you are all doing it. But I would keep a sketchbook. And within that sketchbook, I would write down your ideas. I would consider your process. This process, how did you come to the big idea? Jurors, when they come through, they want clear, succinct, defined ideas. And you have to show them, since graphically, graphics can be through your drawings, but can also be through the written word. So I would think that both of those, your literary arguments and your graphic case, should be presented clearly and beautifully on the two board layouts that you're doing. There's a tartan grid on this. This breaks down into grids. You can start to see squares. You can start to see long horizontals. Whenever I do a competition, and we've done many, many, many of them, I always take my tracing paper, lay it over. You know, I'm drawing with my hands as I speak, because it's the way that I work. But underneath this, you should actually, even before you start to actually compose the board on your screen, take tracing paper and come up with 6 or 7 different layouts, several different layouts with your tracing paper, looking at different things that you want to be big, that you want to be medium, that you want to be small, and then start to write in your paragraphs. Use Photoshop, use Illustrator, you know, use InDesign if you can within your Adobe suite. If you know how to use that, you should absolutely utilize that and start to, you know, make your case. There's very little written information on this, but you do start to have a design diagram, which is quite strong when it sort of comes to the partie. But it's really not that great a board. I think this one is more successful just in sort of the ambience of you really get an idea, of the river and how it sits on the river. This is not as strong, I think, as the first one. This one's more like a magazine article. I just put this on here. There's no right or wrong when it comes to the ambience of how you create an atmosphere of your swimming pool and your context. I will say right now, I'm actually teaching junior studio. I would, I'm a teacher, so I'm going to teach. I would write down, Bernard Shumi's a famous, one of the 20 most famous architects in the world. And he calls it the 3 C's: concept, which would be the partie, concept, the context, i.e. your surrounding area. That would be the mall that you're in, the Perrysburg area, getting off 75, and then your immediate surroundings. You have an immediate surrounding context, you have a medium surrounding context, and you have a large surrounding context. And context is critical to architects when they come up with their ideas. How are you establishing your ideas, right? When it comes to how it sits within the environment. And the third one, the third C for Schumi, is content. And we will call content programmatic requirements. You have a pool, you have a children's area, you have a waiting room area for parents, you have showers, wet showers, dry showers. You know what the program is for about 10,000 square feet. So I'll get pragmatic for a second. So now you have you have a site plan. So you can see on this particular one, this board is ostensibly bifurcated, right? It's split in half, with the left-hand side being a big site plan, sort of showing it with the river and the snake and looking down on the site. And on the right-hand side, is weather, climate, floor plans, smaller items sort of sprinkled throughout with some photographs. That's the hierarchy on this board. And then on the bottom, it's grounded with sections. So I think this is not bad. But the idea is that you're probably going to have, what's interesting about this particular space, you have to span the pool. I suppose you could have columns in the pool, but you probably will not. So it's a larger span project with smaller spaces, right? You can make it 2 floors, 1 floor, however you want to do it with your advisor or your instructors. So I think when it comes to your renderings, you'll sort of see how these renderings, lots of times these are exterior renderings. I think in the past, most of the time, I don't think that BGSU, we give it for graphics, I don't think anybody's ever won first or second prize if they did not, I'm just being straight up with you, if they didn't have exterior and interior renderings. When you're looking for graphic representation, we're interested what the ambience, the atmosphere is that you're creating within a strip shopping mall of that area over there, and what you are creating from the exterior ambience of how to bring people in, as well as the interiors of the swimming pool area, what it's like to be inside the pool, what it's like to be inside the playground area, how the kids go in. So I would strongly suggest that when you do SketchUp or whatever you're doing from your rendering techniques, I think last year quite a few students did SketchUp. Some of you may know Rhino. And most of you may know Revit. But I think in general, a lot of the students seem to use SketchUp, which is fine. Juniors and seniors at BGSU, they use SketchUp with Lumion. They also use Revit. They use Rhino. They use a plethora of media. But you're in high school and your skills are only a certain amount. But I think that it's interesting that you basically starting to think about that. You're starting to think about how you can put your boards together. You can start to see on this particular one, this particular board layout is diagrams where, right, you sort of start to see people moving along, you start to have grids. So please, I'm being redundant, but redundancy sometimes is important. Start to look, so these are contextual renderings. So you have to have a parking lot, right? You have to have like approximately 50 spaces. How far will you go out for your renderings? Are you going to show the immediate context, the surrounding context? You have to decide for yourself. I would think it'd be very important right now how you bring the inside and the outside spaces together. I'm sure your instructors are talking to you about how does natural light come in? Does it come in from the sides? Does it come in from the top through the trussing system that you're using, from the steel, the concrete, whatever you've decided upon? How do you make beautiful inside space that works with the outdoors? Do you want to look into parking? Most really great architects would say no, they don't want to look at a bunch of cars. So you may start to, I would think your landscaping in the area, you have to have an outside deck and terracing. That space, one could arguably would be just as important as the swimming pool itself. How do you combine inside and outside space? So within your renderings, you can start to think about that. Your sections in your plans, should be articulated as such, so that you're going to start to see this flexible framework. So you start to see it's a question of a perspective rendering, right? But once again, this one's sort of like the first one, where you have a big picture shot with an exterior rendering and then plans and sections on the bottom, and you do have written information, overlays up on top, etc. This particular one, you can start to see, once again, these are contexts where you actually have. One thing too is, I'm just going to scoot along here. This one's a very Parsons Farm, so it's a very sustainability, right? You guys, they'll be giving out sustainability awards, and I teach graduate school sustainable design. Most every project that we do right now, we're doing a project out in California. The client wants zero net energy, but it's integrated into the partie. Anybody can do a green roof and just kind of put a green roof on and make it green. Anybody can slap some solar panels on there. It's a question of how do you integrate it with your beautiful design for your pool project, for your swimming pool project. So I think that's something that, I'm sure you've already started to think about. But so this is a good example of a big picture that sort of shows this idea floating in the middle of the site context, the outside spaces, how you move through the gardens, how the building is an extension of the garden space, and then scattered around are sun diagrams, weather diagrams, prevailing breeze diagrams. You should know north is usually up, as I'm sure your instructors have told you within the plan. So you should start to think north, east, south, west, right? Sun rises in the east, sets in the west. We really get just reflective light off the northerly exposure. So how do you site your building? There should be very few IDKs, I always tell my students. That's I don't know. That's not a good thing, when you're entering a competition. You want to try and cut way back on the IDKs and have a lot of I do knows. Right? And so everything that's in there, but you can start to see how they have the photovoltaic arrays, the green roof, the hydroelectric. But I would say even on this one, it doesn't really say why it's placed where it is. There's almost not enough exploration, about the pieces and things, that you have as why they're placed where they are. But it's a strong competition when it comes to basically placing the sustainable elements within the floor plans, the sections, and the diagrams. Same with this one. I've sort of put in, but on this particular one, you get the big bang in the middle, and then you have the arrows that pull out and start to once again sort of pull out the ideas, that are within the project itself from a layout point of view. I would say when I look at this one, this is not a successful board. I find this to be very complicated. So look at it. You should go online and you should Google in architectural winning design competition boards. And you should look at 50 to 100 of them. Take a half hour some night and just, zoom through them all and check it out. What you like, what you don't like. Do you like hierarchy? Do you want to make everything the same? Look at the tartan grids, the underlying structure of the board layout, how the renderings are done. And I would say that this one is actually quite confusing. It's kind of fun from a color point of view, but it's got a lot of text on it, which maybe is good. It's got some diagrams. But basically, these three big pieces, which are floating in the left, middle, and on the right, it's very confusing sort of to figure out what is going on. So I think sometimes simple is better, but I rarely see overlays. I don't think I see enough interior design elevations. And sometimes I think the students have been quite good in the past when it comes to writing things down. I would keep a sketchbook for sure. And even if you haven't started one, I would start one now and write down your ideas, draw on the sketchbook, and even just have a few sketches. You do not have to be a great artist to be a great architect, but architectural jurors like to see little bubble sketches of just where your ideas in your brain, are being synapsally delivered, down through your arm into the computer. I would, don't design on the computer. The computer's a tool. If you design on the computer, you'll be knitting. You should design on your tracing paper and in your sketchbook. And then when you're ready to input it, use the computer as a tool to input your design implementations. But you should have plenty. And the other thing too is time management. Obviously, everybody, including myself, has problems with time management. But super simple layout, super complex. Look at the difference here. For me, I'll take this any day over the other one. This has got a nice ambient space. You can imagine, I'm not saying that this should be, but you can imagine, it's going to be a much bigger space than you're doing, but you can imagine a pool there, that's inside. All the beautiful light coming down from up above, and you could be splashing around. Instead of kids playing soccer, they could be swimming. So you have to decide about natural light coming through and then the layouts. And so I think this has too many elevations. This is something that probably there's too much elevational pieces, and the other pieces, are a bit small on the side. But you can start to see how there's pictures of flowers, trees. I personally like, in my opinion, you should have already gathered and developed maybe 10 to 50 sort of images that you like in pools, nature, skylights, things that outdoor eating, indoor eating, things that are, getting you excited about your project that you can incorporate into your partie, i.e. your big idea as you get starting to go through. Here's just once again, this is quite interesting, very subtle black and white, not a lot of color, right? But it's sort of just elegant black and white. It just depends on how you want to present. You could, you have to decide what water means to you, right? You have to decide what community means to you. You have to decide all these things. And on this one, once again, there's sort of this big axonometric rendering showing the context. And they place a lot of things in the dam area, in the water. There's lots of architectural elements that are floating around. These boards would be large, and you can blow them up and blow them down, section along the bottom, etc. So once again, here you can use photo montage, whatever you feel comfortable with. You have to go, when it comes to rendering and doing your board layouts, some of you are going to be freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, and they break that out into things. There's been lots of juniors, I think, that actually have won first prize for the years, maybe even a sophomore one time, I remember. Lots of times it's seniors, but you have to play to your strengths. And so if you're a so-so renderer and you're not really that good at it, then you may want to use Photoshop and your Illustrator if you're good at that. And it's a great look at it. It's high school, and you're kind of deciding maybe whether you want to get into architecture. Is this something that I might want to go to college for? So it's a great learning experience. So have fun with it, and but made in Brooklyn, so you can start to see how this is sort of broken up vertically, with a horizontal piece at the bottom. Once again, you get a big shot at the top. See the concept? You know, I would have concept, context, means the surrounding environment, and the content, which is the program. How have you dealt with the program? I will say I'm kind of looking around. There's not one. Most of the time, lots of times I've noticed in the past that students tend to make color code their plans. You can do that if you want. I think that that works to a certain degree. You have to be a little careful with that. Sometimes it sort of gets the plans somewhat confusing depending on how many colors you're using. If you look at most competitions, we always, and you don't have to do this, it's not a very big program, but you can just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then have a key. So things are keyed, and then you see one. So 1 is the pool, 2 is the lockers, 3 is the wet showers, etc. And then you'll have a key off to the side, as compared to making big letters. So these are graphics. So the reason that you want to look at 10, 20, 30, 40 layouts, what do you like? Look at it carefully. You should be doing lots of research as you're doing your final designs here. Research is looking at boards, looking at shadows, looking at light, looking at renderings. How do you want to do your floor plans? How do you want to take all your sustainable components and put them together? And I would come up with several different ways to lay out your board through the tartan grid with the underlayment. And then, so when we do a competition and we lay things, we'll probably have maybe 10 to 12 sheets of tracing paper that are overlaid and then overlaid and then overlaid and then overlaid. And we will keep continually do this until we ostensibly come up with the layout that we've done. And then even, you sort of moving, shuffling things around. You have an exploded axonometric here off to the right, which sort of explains things volumetrically. The pieces along the bottom are quite lovely, just in the sense of, showing the light and the natural light coming through into the spaces, whatever that may be. On this particular one, you start to see a big sort of city site section, at the bottom. How much do you want to show in your sections? Most of the time, so there's a big macro world at Perrysburg and Toledo, and then there's a micro world and a super micro world of just your particular site of 50 cars and your project. I find that most of the time, 90% of the students show just the immediate project themselves. I understand that, and I agree with that to a certain extent, but I think you should show at least somewhere the overriding context within the graphic representation layout of your board. So that architects, you got to remember, no, you can't present. So you have to present clearly. And most of the time, architects go from macro, the larger environment, down to the smaller environment, i.e. the program of your 10,000 square foot swimming training facility. I put this one on. So if you look at this, it's a strong bottom. I think it's too light to a certain degree. You do, though, have interior, exterior renderings. Here's one that, I think is very, very poor. I don't think that this is, a very good rendering. There's way, way too much written information, not nearly enough graphic information. I think everybody would sort of agree that, you'd probably walk by this one very, very quickly. Most of the time I take about, honestly, so there's maybe, I think last year there was 68 or 72 projects, or maybe 54. The pandemic's been a little slow, but say some years there's been 100. So I basically, and I've juried hundreds of competitions at Michigan, Ohio State, out East, you name it. I've juried lots of them, and portfolios for graduate school students as well. Point being is that I probably go to, if there's 100 students, I probably can drop out 90 in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, just through the graphic representation that we're talking about. So if you have a great idea, I cannot impress upon you how important it is to have a simple, straightforward, beautiful, well thought out layout rendered graphic representation with a strong concept of how you got there, the process, a strong concept of how it fits in the environment. Do you want to stay with the environment, or do you want to say, hey, look at me, I don't like what's going on in this strip mall. I'm going to make something different and call attention to my building beautifully, or I'm going to stick within the strip mall and I like it a lot, and so I'm going to play upon that. Whatever it is, you have to go all in, and your boards have to show that. And then how you've finally approached the program, solved the program, where you're now starting to, you might be able to, some of you know what an axonometric is. So this is starting to break down the program into diagrams. You have private and public spaces in your building. The public space is the swimming pool, the private spaces are the locker rooms. So you have to think about where this stuff goes. And I'm sure your instructors and your advisors are helping you along with this. But this is an okay board, but I don't think it's that interesting. Yeah, I think the people, so I'm getting very picky now. I don't really like the colors, they're kind of strange, and the people are too big. Your eye goes to the people and not to the building. This one, once again, you get a big money shot, down along the city. You get lots of, you see site entry, corner impediment, campus connectivity, ribbons, vertical street, data arena, rotor farm, power generation, thermal chimneys, atrium ventilation. So you're going to have all these subsets. And, you're only 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. And that's why I would just say the computer is the greatest thing that's ever been invented, period. It can also be the worst thing that's ever been invented, depending on the way you use it. If you're sort of designing on the screen, then I think you're going to run into problems. Next to the screen, you should have tons and tons of tracing paper, lots of things in your sketchbook, and then draw on your tracing paper. Use it because you can see through it. You know what tracing paper is. You can get it at Michael's, all sorts of places, because then you layer things up, and then when you're ready to go, you put it in the computer. But you work on your boards, and you do have two boards. Most of the time, they are not continuous boards. They go at a V, as I recall. They sit up and they have numbers on them, and we don't know who people are. There's just 1 through 74. Everybody has a number, and so it's anonymous as well. It should be. This one, once again, I think is a very poor I think this one's way, 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 way too complicated. Way too much information, not nearly enough drawings. Everything's too small. There's really not a lot of hierarchy. It kind of looks like a jumbled mess to a certain degree. Now, that's just my opinion. You can say, hey, Scott, I love this and I want to do it like this, but that's fine. There's a lot of research in it, a lot of pertinent information, but I think hierarchy probably is extremely, extremely important. Here's another one where everything's sort of the same size, but it works certainly better than this one. I still like the ones where you have the big shot and interior shots, and you have diagrams and floor plans and something on the ground to ground the things with. But what I like about this is quite a bit of written information. You do want to have enough graphic information telling the story of what you're trying to get across, what you're trying to diagram. I think this is the last one. And then, this one's just sort of just make-believe sci-fi, but it's very, you can't render like this. You're not expected to be able to. But, and it's very esoteric, like a sci-fi film movie. But don't forget, even though it's a pool, you're telling a story. When you go to see a movie, you see a Star Wars, and, it's cool. My sister worked for George Lucas, who did Star Wars for years. For 20 years in the business end of things. So I've met him a bunch of times. You go into his office and he has a whole bunch of storyboards. He's an architect, but he went into directing films. And he tells a journey, of Luke Skywalker in the story. So you go in and you see storyboard after storyboard after storyboard after storyboard. It's the atmosphere. It's the same sort of thing. How do you want to approach the pool situation? How do you want to bring people in? Do you want to treat it just like any other parking lot where you just come into a box, and you enter? So I would think the inside-outside relationships and natural light would be critical when it came to your renderings and the design of your spaces. I think that's it on that end. I do have just a couple things. Whoop. So here's some sustainabilities, right? So, here's a site plan that talks about sustainable architecture where you can start to look at. You can start to actually have pictures, of solar panels, but you just put them on the side, you incorporate them into the roofs, how's incorporated with and articulated and manifested into your design. I would hope that you would have a whole bunch of photographs that, you started to sort of look at. How does this, there we go. So you can start to see, just with green roofs, there's lots of different ways to do green roofs, but obviously green roofs, that way you can have a cistern, you could have a large cistern where you collect water. So if you have your roofing system for your pool, you can actually collect water when it rains and snows, and all that can then go into a retainer, which is a cistern, and then you can pump all that water out, so you won't need any irrigate. You won't have to pay for irrigation. You can use all the water that you collect from your project. Somehow you have to show and explain that, within your sustainability of designs. Like tomorrow, I have a review for my juniors. I will review. I've got 16 students, and it's a 6-hour studio. So I'll spend 20 minutes to a half hour with each studio. It's mandated tomorrow that they have to have lots and lots of pictures within their project of things that they're looking at out in the universe of what they're thinking about. So, you can start to, you may decide when you look at a skin, and you're not far enough along yet where you would actually be able to figure everything out, but you may decide that part of your facade, your elevation closes up. You might have a big shade screen. It's very important that you think and that you start to understand the prevailing breezes in Perrysburg and in Toledo. I think they come from the southwest is the prevailing breezes. And then what is the difference between east sun, southerly sun, and westerly sun? This is an indoor pool, right? So this time of year it's 0 out, and they're inside swimming. You have chlorine, and you have all these things going on, and I don't want to get too pragmatic because this is rendering day board layout, but you do have to start to think about this. Maybe part of your facade opens up and lets light in, then maybe part of it closes down. You have no budget. No one cares what your building is going to cost at this point in time. If they do, then I think that's an issue, right? But maybe the whole thing closes down where you want to cut the light off sometimes, but then you press a button. It might cost a lot of money, but you can press a button and the whole thing opens up. It can be a mechanical facade that lets light in. And it can be, architects do this all the time, where they actually control the sunlight during the day. So that can be part of your sustainable components. And you can find diagrams and buildings and some ideas that can go on the board. People will know it's not your work. You're using it for inspiration. You're not copying. It's not going to be in your design. It's just using ideas, right? So, there's a structure which has green roofs, could be housing, could be all sorts of things, and you can walk up on it and it sort of moves up and down. It's very cool. So all I'm saying is that you want to start to think, this is by Snøhetta, which is a firm out of Oslo. They actually did a project down at Bowling Green, their first project in the United States. So you should start to think, about overhangs, sustainability, sun, rain, wind, water, the 4 renewable energies. We want to go to zero net energy. So that's water. And by the way, last time I checked, you're doing a pool. So you need to have a conviction towards water. You have hydro, water, you have sun, solar, you have wind, power, and you have geothermal, i.e. rock and mantle. So those are things, doesn't matter what grade you're in, you can start to research. You should have a whole binder file on your competition and keep it, in order with all your sketches and things. And then it's a question, it's better to have too much information and get it all on your board and then delete. But you need to come up with the time management schedule is the biggest problem. We've all been there where you're staying up all night and cramming at the last minute, or you don't get it in because you just didn't get it done. You need to set some milestone dates for yourself from a rendering point of view, from a piece the point of view. Well, we're talking about renderings too. I'd say this every year. It gets better every year, but what you see on your computer, folks, is lighter than when it actually prints. When it actually prints out for your board, it's much, much darker. So you need to make sure you leave yourself enough time to do a dry run prints where you actually will print the board and it's not going to be the one that you're going to use. So it might be 2 days before, it might be 3 days before, it might be 1 day or 8 hours before, and then you can redline that and go, oh, that doesn't look good. That's too dark. That I don't like that, and tweak it. Tweak it, make the changes over the last day or two, and then hand it back in. But you should start to compose your boards now. Even if you don't wait till you're all done with all your information and then compose it. You should start to have an idea of how you're starting to compose boards now, and then fill in and change it as you go along within the tartan grid and the information that you want to articulate and manifest. So you can start to see, this is just, how they're starting to think about diagrams and sustainable items, etc. And then the last thing I'm going to do, and then I'm done, that'll be an hour or so, is just a sketchbook list. So I think, look, I'm an artist, as well as an architect, and any architect worth their salt keeps a sketchbook. You do not have to you don't have to draw well. You can draw like a stick figure, but it's a question of intention. So architects like to see, you understand this would just be one small component of your rendering board layout. But it shows the partie, the big idea of maybe how you got to the idea of how you have to have a site strategy. What is your site strategy in a shopping mall area of an outdoor mall that basically is 3/4 asphalt parking lot? How can you bring a better world into the swimming pool area to make it a better place for people to live and come spend time with their families? It's almost like you want to build an enclave to a certain degree. If you have sketches in your sketchbook, you can do collage, you can cut and paste things out and show that in your upfront work of how you got to your big idea. Competitions are usually won on like a major rendering, which I've been showing you, or a major model, which most of the time that has not happened. Students, don't model make too much and don't have time to do that. But your partie and your overall idea is absolutely critical. If you don't have a strong idea, that would be a partie, and you have fantastic renderings, you still may not win. Graphics will not always win the day. You have to have good, strong designs. So, you can start to just think about rendering. Look, that's some of the greatest. That's a Zaha rendering, right? When you have a time, look up Zaha Hadid, Hadid. Look up Frank Gehry. Look up Tado Ando. People you would probably not know right now, but and we wouldn't expect you to. But if you're into it, I teach college and grad school, but I'm always helping students, young. And I have summer camps where I'm actually teaching 8, 9, 10-year-olds. So these sketches have intention, is my point. And so, it's the same sort of thing. You can't draw like that or do painting like that. But so some people do watercolors, right, where they're starting to talk about interior space. So I think that's all. To wrap things up, the one thing that I'd say is have fun with it. And the most important thing is have a strong concept. Explain the context that you're in. And explain the content, i.e. the program, from a pragmatic, functional point of view, from an atmospheric, romantic point of view, of what you're bringing more than just function to the building of swimming. How can you make it a fun community space with natural light, etc., inside and outside? I would think the outside decks, pergolas, terraces, trees, landscaping would be extraordinarily important for your partee. And then all your rendering techniques that go with it. And I would really put emphasis on hierarchy, so not everything is the same. And make sure at least if you're doing renderings, whatever SketchUp, Rhino, whatever you're using, have exterior and certainly at least one interior rendering, if not two. They don't need to be big, but you need to start to show the ambience of what's going on inside. And if anybody has any questions or anybody ever wants to come down to BG or you look at this recording in the next couple weeks and you want to talk to me, I'd be happy to talk to you and help you out. So that's it for me, Elizabeth.
Great. Thank you so much, Scott. Thank you for an excellent presentation.
My pleasure. I think it'll be fun. I really look forward to seeing the final results. It's always good.
Yes. Well, with that, we'll close out the night. Again, thank you to everyone who came tonight, and we hope that more people log into the YouTube channel afterwards. So thanks again, Scott. We really appreciate your time.